The forgotten biblical origins of the Philippines. Could this nation be part of an ancient prophecy? Have you ever wondered if the Philippines might have a hidden place in the Bible? Could this beautiful island nation, so often left out of global history, actually be woven into an ancient prophecy? We know the Philippines for its stunning beaches, resilient people, and deep Christian faith. But what if its story doesn't begin with Spanish colonization? What if the true origins of the Filipino people trace back thousands of years to the very pages of Scripture? In this video, we're diving into an extraordinary theory that the Philippines may have biblical roots long forgotten by mainstream history. This isn't just about archaeology or religion. It's about identity, destiny, and a narrative that could turn everything you thought you knew on its head. You've probably heard of the lands of the Bible: Israel, Egypt, Babylon. But what if a nation in the Far East had a role in this sacred history, hidden in plain sight? With more than 7,000 islands and a history of ancient seafaring, the Philippines was a crossroads of civilizations long before the age of exploration. Imagine this: ancient ships traveling across the oceans, connecting the Middle East, India, China, and the Pacific. Could these ancient trade routes have reached as far as the Philippines? Some researchers believe they did. There's even a mysterious place mentioned in the Bible, Ophir, a land said to be rich in gold, silver, ivory, and peacocks. That last detail might surprise you. Peacocks don't come from the Middle East. They come from Southeast Asia. Could Ophir have been the Philippines? It sounds far-fetched, until you consider that the Philippines has long been known for its gold and rich natural resources. Even Spanish colonizers wrote about its vast wealth. And it wasn't just gold. Filipinos were master craftsmen, trading across oceans long before Europeans arrived. But the connections don't stop with geography and trade. What if the people of the Philippines themselves have biblical origins? The Bible says that all nations descended from the three sons of Noah: Shem, Ham, and Japheth. While most scholars focus on the Middle East or Europe, the lineages of Asian and Pacific peoples are often ignored. But in Genesis 10:5, Japheth is called the father of the maritime nations. That's interesting, because ancient Filipinos were some of the most advanced seafarers the world has ever seen. Some believe the Austronesian migrations, which spread seafaring people across the Pacific, including to the Philippines, could trace back to Japheth's line. Others point to Ham's descendants, like Cush and Mizraim, founders of ancient African and Middle Eastern empires. These groups were known for gold, art, and architecture, just like the early Filipino civilizations. Modern genetic studies show that Filipinos have a unique mix of ancestries: Southeast Asian, East Asian, South Asian, and even some African markers, hinting at a diverse and ancient past that doesn't fit neatly into today's historical models. So why has this story been ignored? The truth is, history is usually told from the West. The Middle East and Europe get the spotlight, while Asia and the Pacific remain on the sidelines. But that may be changing. Just as DNA evidence rewrote the story of Europe's origins, it might also uncover a hidden biblical link to Southeast Asia into the Philippines. Imagine what that would mean. What if the Philippines wasn't just a colony or a remote island chain, but a key player in God's unfolding plan through history? What if this nation has been quietly carrying a torch of faith while Christianity fades in the West? Could the Philippines be rising, not just economically but spiritually, as a beacon of light in the East? Throughout the Bible, we see a pattern. God moves through different nations across time. First Israel, then Rome, then Europe. Maybe now it's Asia's time. Maybe, just maybe, the Philippines is being called for something greater. So stay with us, because by the end of this journey, you might see the Philippines and your own faith in a whole new light. This isn't just forgotten history. This might be prophecy, rediscovered. Could the Philippines be the next great center of Christian influence? What if its destiny was written long before colonization, hidden within the pages of ancient scripture? Perhaps the real question isn't whether the Philippines has biblical roots, but why this possibility is being revealed now. What if this moment in history isn't a coincidence, but a calling? Could it be that this island nation, often overlooked in global narratives, is beginning to rediscover a forgotten identity, one that isn't just cultural or historical, but spiritual. Let's take a journey deeper than textbooks, deeper than maps. A journey through ancient scriptures, global trade routes, and the enduring spirit of a people whose faith has never wavered. At first glance, the idea might sound far-fetched. The Philippines linked to the Bible? But when we look at history with fresh eyes, when we follow the clues left behind in archaeology, oral traditions, and ancient trade, it becomes a lot harder to dismiss. One of the most intriguing pieces of this puzzle centers around a place mentioned in 1 Kings 10:22, a land called Ophir. This mysterious location was famous for its unimaginable wealth, particularly gold. King Solomon's ships sailed there every 3 years, returning with treasures: gold, silver, ivory, apes, and peacocks. But where was Ophir? Many theories have been proposed. Some say it was in Africa, others point to India. But a growing number of researchers are turning their gaze eastward, toward Southeast Asia, toward the Philippines. Why? Let's start with one of the most compelling discoveries in Philippine archaeology, the Surigao treasure. Found in Mindanao, this collection of ancient gold artifacts includes masks, jewelry, and ceremonial items, all crafted with stunning precision. It's considered one of the most important archaeological finds in Southeast Asia. And its style? Remarkably similar to the kind of wealth described in the Bible's accounts of Ophir. Still think it's a stretch? Here's something else. When Ferdinand Magellan arrived in the Philippines in 1521, he didn't find a land waiting to be civilized. He found thriving communities, people wearing gold, trading gold, even using gold nuggets instead of coins. Spanish records tell us that the people of Cebu wore gold in their everyday lives. That doesn't just suggest prosperity, it suggests a deep-rooted culture of wealth and craftsmanship. And then there's the detail most people overlook: peacocks. Peacocks aren't native to the Middle East. They're from Southeast Asia, India, Sri Lanka, and yes, even the surrounding islands. So if Solomon's ships brought back peacocks from Ophir, then Ophir had to be connected to that region. That one detail alone challenges the long-held belief that Ophir was somewhere close to the Middle East. Now some skeptics argue, but the Philippines is too far for ancient ships to reach. That would make sense if ancient people didn't already have the means to travel great distances. But history tells us a different story. The Phoenicians, who were likely involved in building and navigating Solomon's fleet, were among the greatest seafarers of the ancient world. Their ships reached Africa and India. So why not venture farther east, especially if the reward was a land rich in gold? And modern maritime archaeology supports this idea. Shipwrecks dating back over 2,000 years have been discovered in the Indian Ocean, carrying goods from China and Southeast Asia. That's long before the Spanish arrived. That's proof that these ancient trade networks existed and thrived. So what if the Philippines wasn't just a part of those trade routes, but one of their most important stops? Western history has often portrayed the Philippines as a land that only came into significance after Spanish colonization. But long before that, the islands were home to complex societies, advanced maritime technology, and thriving trade. Early Spanish records describe powerful rulers, datus, rajas, and sultans, who governed well-organized settlements and conducted international trade. The people had their own writing system, baybayin, and their own boats, which they used to sail across vast stretches of ocean. They were not isolated, they were not primitive. They were part of something much older, something much bigger. Could it be that Spanish colonization buried an even older truth? A truth that connected the Philippines to ancient civilizations, and possibly to biblical history? If so, why haven't we heard more about this? Because history, as it's been told, has long centered on the West. Most biblical scholarship has focused on the Middle East and Europe, rarely looking beyond those borders. Asia, and particularly Southeast Asia, has been left out of the conversation. But that's changing. Just as new discoveries have forced historians to rethink how civilization reached the Americas, we may now be on the brink of a major revelation about the ancient world's connection to the Far East. Imagine if solid, undeniable evidence emerged showing that Ophir was, in fact, the Philippines. It would rewrite biblical geography, it would reshape our understanding of ancient global networks, and it would place the Philippines at the very heart of a divine narrative stretching back thousands of years. But maybe the most powerful evidence isn't found in archaeology or trade records. Maybe it's found in the people themselves. Despite centuries of colonization, struggle, and hardship, the Filipino spirit of faith has never been broken. In a time when Christianity is declining in the West, the Philippines remains one of the most devout Christian nations in the world. Churches are full, faith is alive, hope endures. Could that be a coincidence? Or could it be a sign? In the Bible, we see how God moves through different nations in different eras. First Israel, then Rome, then Europe. Could the Philippines be next? Could this nation, once forgotten by history, be rising again? Not just economically or culturally, but spiritually? Maybe the question isn't, was the Philippines part of the Bible? Maybe the real question is the Philippines part of God's unfolding plan right now? The Philippines, a forgotten biblical nation, for centuries the Philippines has often been viewed through a narrow lens, defined by colonization, natural beauty, and resilience. But what if this island nation has a far deeper story, one that stretches beyond the reach of European conquest and deep into the heart of biblical history? What if the Philippines was never just a footnote in global events, but a hidden chapter waiting to be rediscovered? What if this land, blessed with mountains that once sparkled with gold and rivers that whispered of ancient trade, was known to the great kings of the Bible? What if the treasure was never just the gold in its soil, but the faith of its people? Let's journey into a forgotten history, one that challenges everything we thought we knew. The Philippines has long been a place of wealth, not just in material terms, but in culture, character, and connection. Long before Spanish ships ever anchored on its shores, the islands were home to thriving communities. These were not primitive tribes lost in time, but highly organized societies with systems of writing, rich traditions, and far-reaching trade networks. Gold wasn't just a rare prize, it was common. So common that early explorers like Magellan's crew recorded seeing natives wearing it daily, decorating their clothing, adorning their bodies, even trading it like coins. But what if that gold wasn't just a sign of wealth, but a clue? The land of Ophir, mentioned in 1 Kings 10:22, it was a place Solomon's fleet visited every 3 years, bringing back unimaginable treasures: gold, silver, ivory, apes, and peacocks. The location of Ophir has been debated for centuries. Some say Africa, others India. But what if the answer lies further east? What if Ophir was the Philippines? It's not such a wild idea. The descriptions match, the timelines align, the trade routes existed. But more than that, the spiritual symbolism fits. Because maybe the Philippines wasn't just a place of ancient wealth. Maybe it's a land set apart, chosen for something greater. Not just gold, but faith. Today, the Philippines stands out globally. It's the largest Christian nation in Asia, surrounded by countries dominated by Buddhism, Islam, or secularism. Yet the Christian flame here burns bright. Churches overflow, processions fill the streets. The cross still stands tall in every town and city. In a world where faith is fading, the Philippines remains a beacon. But why? Why here? Why this nation? Perhaps the answer isn't in history books, but in prophecy, in divine purpose. Maybe this wasn't just chance. Maybe it was destiny. We see something truly powerful when we look at the Filipino spirit, especially in times of crisis. Remember Super Typhoon Yolanda in 2013? One of the strongest storms ever recorded. Entire cities were erased, thousands of lives lost, millions without homes. And yet, what did the world witness? Not chaos, not hopelessness, but faith. Filipinos praying in the rubble, singing hymns in makeshift churches, bowing heads in flooded streets, not in despair, but in devotion. Thanking God not for the storm, but for survival. Where else do we see that? In many parts of the world, tragedy leads to anger, to doubt, to walking away from faith. But in the Philippines, hardship seems to deepen it, forge it, make it stronger. Why? Because perhaps the real treasure of this nation was never under the ground. It was always in the hearts of the people. The Bible tells us in Ephesians 6:12 that the greatest battles are not against flesh and blood, but against the spiritual forces of evil. And in this spiritual war, the Philippines has become something rare, a stronghold, a lighthouse, a warrior for faith in a world of rising darkness. But the world doesn't often talk about this, because it's not just about the Philippines being Christian, it's about how it lives Christianity, not just in churches, but in everyday life, not just in good times, but in the darkest hours. And there's more. One of the most overlooked movements in modern Christianity is the quiet mission of Filipino workers abroad. You've seen them in hospitals, homes, cruise ships, factories. Overseas Filipino workers, OFWs, are everywhere. But while they send money back home, they also send something else: faith. They bring the gospel into places where it's fading. They bring prayers into secular cities. They become living testimonies, not because they're trained missionaries, but because of how they live, how they love, how they serve. Filipinos are now evangelizing the world, not from pulpits, but from hospital bedsides, classrooms, and care homes. So, could it be? Could the Philippines, this archipelago of more than 7,000 islands, be part of a divine pattern? A nation once overflowing with gold, now rich in faith. A land perhaps known to Solomon, now standing strong as the West forgets its faith. A people shaped not by conquest, but by conviction. Perhaps this isn't just a country with a Christian history. Perhaps it's a country with a Christian calling. The story of the Philippines is still unfolding. But one thing is certain. This is not just a forgotten island nation. It is a spiritual stronghold, a prophetic voice, a miracle in motion. And maybe, just maybe, its greatest chapter is still to come. The new face of Christianity, the Filipino mission. In today's world, when people talk about Christian influence, they often think of Rome, Jerusalem, or America. But quietly, steadily, a new light is rising, not from the West, but from the islands of the East, the Philippines. More than 10 million Filipinos live and work abroad. You'll find them in the hospitals of New York, the homes of Dubai, the ships crossing oceans, and the classrooms of Europe. But these men and women are not just workers. They are witnesses, carriers of something more powerful than a passport or a profession. They carry faith. In the United States, Filipino nurses are the heartbeat of the healthcare system, known not just for their skill, but for their gentleness, prayers, and quiet strength. Ask any patient, and they'll tell you, it wasn't just the medicine that helped. It was the comforting words, the prayers whispered in hospital halls, the hand that held theirs through the pain. In fact, it's often said in the medical world, if all the Filipino nurses left, American healthcare would collapse. But maybe there's a deeper reason for their presence. Maybe it's not just work, it's mission. Now shift your eyes to the Middle East, places where Christianity is restricted, where churches are hidden, and where public worship could cost you everything. And yet, in quiet apartments, behind closed doors, in whispered songs and late-night prayer circles, faith is alive, led not by trained pastors, but by Filipino domestic workers, engineers, and caregivers. They lead underground Bible studies, sometimes at great risk. They pray over employers. They share Christ, not through debate or doctrine, but through kindness, patience, and love. Some employers, Muslim, atheist, or agnostic, have come to faith not by force, but by the quiet, radiant example of their Filipino staff. Could it be that God has placed Filipinos in places where traditional missionaries cannot go, to shine in the shadows, to bring light where it's forbidden? Look at the pattern. Once Christianity spread from Jerusalem to Rome, then to Europe, then to America. But now churches in the West are emptying, faith is fading, and while the West questions, the Philippines believes. The question is no longer whether the Philippines has a divine mission. The question is, are we finally ready to see it? The Filipino people live their faith not just on Sundays, but every day, in small acts, in silent prayers, in lives that reflect hope in the face of hardship. While Western Christians retreat, Filipinos advance. They bring the gospel not with megaphones, but with meekness. Not in cathedrals, but in kitchens, clinics, and care homes. If the current trend continues, we may be witnessing a global shift. a time where Christianity's strongest anchor is not in the Vatican, not in Washington, but in Manila. Not on television, but in the hearts of workers whose only pulpit is how they live. But this isn't new. The Philippines has long been a refuge for the faithful, a sanctuary in times of persecution, a land where Christianity was not just protected, but preserved. One of the most powerful yet overlooked stories comes from the 17th century. During Japan's Tokugawa shogunate, Christianity was seen as a threat. Missionaries were banned. Believers were tortured, forced to step on images of Christ to prove their rejection. Thousands of Japanese Christians, called Kirishitan, were hunted, imprisoned, or killed. But some fled. And where did they go? The Philippines. Then under Spanish rule, but deeply Catholic, the islands became a haven. Filipino communities opened their arms. Spanish missionaries sheltered them. And these refugees found a place where they could once again worship freely. Some even stayed, married into local families, and left behind a legacy. A reminder that the Philippines was a guardian of faith even centuries ago. So again, we must ask, was this just coincidence? Or was it calling? Even today, the Philippines continues to produce modern figures who inspire faith not just at home, but worldwide. Missionaries, preachers, teachers, nurses, artists, caregivers, politicians, prisoners, parents. In every walk of life, they carry one thing above all else, the name of Christ. They don't need titles. They don't need platforms. Their witness is their resilience, their joy, their grace under pressure. So what now? Maybe the Philippines is not just a participant in Christianity's story. Maybe it's a central character. Maybe it is the torchbearer of a faith the West has forgotten. And maybe the role of Filipinos across the globe isn't just to send money home, but to send hope into every corner of the world. So the next time you hear about an OFW, the next time you meet a Filipino nurse, teacher, helper, or engineer, look deeper. You may just be looking at one of the quiet missionaries of our time, a servant, a warrior, a witness. And if this is true, then maybe the most important question isn't, what is the Philippines' mission? It's, what's yours? Faith, fame, and a nation's calling, the story of Pacquiao, prophecy, and the Philippines. When you think of greatness in boxing, one name echoes across the world, Manny Pacquiao. Not just a Filipino icon, not just a world champion, but a symbol, a story, a sign of something far greater than belts or fame. Manny Pacquiao was born into poverty, not the kind you read about in headlines, but the kind where hunger is normal and survival is a daily victory. He sold bread and donuts on the streets just to eat, slept on cardboard, fought not for sport, but for life. And yet from that hardship rose a warrior, not just a boxer, but an unstoppable force. He didn't just win, he dominated across 8 weight divisions, shattering records and expectations. From Manila's dusty corners to the roaring lights of Las Vegas, Pacquiao became a global phenomenon. Millions watched, billions admired. But it wasn't the punches that made history. It was what happened after the ring. At the peak of his fame, with fortune, power, and global recognition in his grasp, Pacquiao did something few could understand. He walked away, not from boxing, but from the lifestyle that came with it. The women, the gambling, the chaos of celebrity life. He turned his back on it all. And why? Because he heard a call, not from a promoter, not from a sponsor, but from God. He declared himself a born-again Christian, not in secret, not behind closed doors, but in the full spotlight of the media. And when asked what drove this change, he said something that stunned even his critics. Boxing is my profession, but serving God is my mission. Let that settle for a moment. This was a man who had it all and realized it meant nothing without faith. In a world where fame often destroys those who chase it, Pacquiao became an anomaly. While Western celebrities crumble under the weight of wealth and indulgence, lost in scandals, rehab, and depression, Pacquiao found peace not in possessions, but in purpose. He traded the path of self-glory for one of service. He now preaches, builds churches, helps the poor, and shares the gospel wherever he goes. This wasn't a side note in his career. It became the headline of his life. But Manny isn't the only one who saw something special in the Philippines. Long before social media, before global attention turned eastward, there was a voice in America, a man of deep conviction and insight, Bishop Fulton Sheen, one of the most influential Catholic evangelists of the 20th century, a scholar, a preacher, a prophet in his own right. In one of his sermons, Sheen didn't speak about Rome or Europe or even the future of Christianity in the West. He spoke of the Philippines. He called it one of the last strongholds of true Christianity in the modern world. He saw the resilience of the Filipino people, their unshakable faith, their quiet, enduring light in a world darkening with doubt. To him, the Philippines wasn't just another nation. It was a beacon, a living prophecy. And when you start connecting the dots, the pattern becomes hard to ignore. The Philippines has been a place of refuge, a cradle for faith, a home for those seeking spiritual safety. Think back to the 1600s, when Japanese Christians, persecuted under the Tokugawa regime, fled their homeland, fearing death for their beliefs. Where did they go? Not to Europe, not to America. They came to the Philippines, and the Filipinos, already deeply rooted in their own faith, welcomed them, sheltered them, worshipped with them. That small act of compassion became a lasting legacy, a reminder that this nation has long stood as a fortress of faith in a region where belief is often tested. So what do we make of all this? A champion who walked away from glory to glorify God, a bishop who saw the Philippines as a spiritual torchbearer, a nation that has sheltered the persecuted, uplifted the broken, and stood firm in storms, both physical and spiritual. Could it be that this is not random? Could it be that God has chosen the Philippines for something greater? Not because it's the wealthiest, not because it's the biggest, but because it has something the world desperately needs, a living, breathing faith that refuses to die. We live in an age where many nations are turning away from faith, where churches become empty halls, where truth is traded for trends. And yet, in the heart of Southeast Asia, there's a people who still kneel to pray, still sing to the heavens after typhoons, still carry the message of Christ into corners of the world where even missionaries cannot go. This isn't just about Pacquiao. It's not even just about the Philippines. It's about a movement, a divine momentum, a rising tide of purpose and mission and calling. The question isn't if God is working through the Philippines. The question is, what part are we meant to play in this story? Because maybe, just maybe, we are only now beginning to see the full picture. And maybe it's time to stop asking, where is the next great move of God? And start realizing it might already be here. Gold or God? The rising light of the Philippines. For centuries, kings waged wars, nations rose and fell, and empires were built, all for gold. Shiny, precious, desired. The pursuit of wealth has shaped the world. It filled treasuries, built palaces, and turned men into legends or monsters. But buried beneath this never-ending chase lies a deeper, far more eternal question. What truly holds value? Gold or faith? This isn't just a philosophical question. It's a spiritual mirror, reflecting the soul of every nation, every leader, every person. And it's a question that echoes through Scripture, especially in the life of one man, King Solomon, a man blessed with unmatched wisdom, a king who built the grandest temple the world had ever seen, a ruler whose riches made other monarchs travel continents just to hear him speak. Solomon had it all: gold, glory, power. But in the end, it wasn't his wealth that made him fall. It was his heart that turned away from God. The very things he once thanked God for, his treasure, his alliances, his success, became the very chains that pulled him away from the source of it all. In the book of Ecclesiastes, Solomon looks back over his life and writes these haunting words: meaningless, meaningless. Everything is meaningless. That's not the voice of a poor man. That's the voice of someone who had everything and realized it was worth nothing without God. Fast forward to today, and the story still repeats. In the West, once the stronghold of Christianity, we see nations like the United States and much of Europe shifting away from faith. Majestic cathedrals stand, but they are quiet now. Not with prayer, but with silence. Some have become museums, others nightclubs or shopping malls. And in the hearts of many, the emptiness is louder than ever. Spiritual decline, depression, a desperate hunger for meaning in a world drowning in material wealth. But then, halfway across the world, something different is happening. In a nation of more than 7,000 islands, battered by typhoons, challenged by poverty, and often overlooked by the global elite, faith is thriving. In the Philippines, churches are not empty. They are overflowing. Worship rises from the mountains, the streets, the oceanside chapels. In the darkest nights of disaster, voices still rise, not in anger, but in prayer. While some nations ask, "Where is God?" the Philippines declares, "God is with us." And maybe, just maybe, this is not by accident. In Matthew 5:14, Jesus says, "You are the light of the world. A city on a hill cannot be hidden." It's a verse once used to describe America, seen in the 1600s as a beacon of Christian virtue by John Winthrop and others. But perhaps the spiritual torch is moving. Could it be that in this new era, the Philippines is becoming the city on a hill? A light in the east, a nation not defined by its economy, but by its unshakable faith. Look around the world today. Over 10 million Filipinos live and work abroad. In hospitals across the U.S., Filipino nurses not only heal, they pray. In Middle Eastern homes where Christianity is restricted, Filipino caregivers lead underground Bible studies, whispering hope where silence once ruled. In schools across Africa, in oil rigs, in cruise ships, in tech firms, in quiet corners of the globe, they are planting seeds of faith, not with fanfare, not with titles, but with lives filled with kindness, compassion, and the love of Christ. So, what if this was the plan all along? What if God, knowing that the traditional centers of Christianity would one day falter, prepared a people in the background, a people shaped by suffering but anchored by faith, a people scattered not to be lost, but to ignite the world? What if you, yes you, are part of that plan? This isn't just about national destiny, it's about personal calling. Solomon's story shows us that wealth without faith is empty. The West's decline reminds us that gold fades, but God remains. The Filipino people show us what it looks like to endure hardship and still shine. So the question isn't, does the Philippines have a divine mission? The question is, will we embrace it? Will we rise with purpose or stay content with comfort? Will we chase riches that rust or live lives that shine with eternal worth? Because in a world that is searching, in a time when hope seems dim, God may be lifting up a new light, not from the palaces of the powerful, but from the heart of an island nation that never let go of him. The Philippines, the new city on a hill, and the light, it's in your hands.